What is the best explanation for objective morality? Now, we're not talking about subjective morality. There's no question about that. Who cares? Subjective morality is my taste, my opinion, my preference. There's no dispute about that. We're talking about objective morality. Objective is in the sense that it's true whether I believe it or not. Years ago, I had a friend who was talking to a young agnostic student who he was friends with, and they were kind of talking back and forth, and he discovered that his friend was a moral subjectivist, a moral relativist. He didn't believe that morality is really objectively true. And so my buddy said, well, wait a minute, what about murder? Murdering someone for fun, you don't think that's objectively wrong? Then his friend, the relativist, said, well, I mean, I wouldn't murder anybody. I wouldn't want to do that. I'm not into murder, but maybe for somebody else, they think that that's right, and who am I to say? He said, well, what about the Holocaust? 6 million Jews killed, gas chamber. And the friend started to wince. I mean, he just really started to tighten up. If I was a Hitler Youth, I probably would have thought that it was right if I was living at that time. So my friend's like, rapid fire. All right, the Crusades. He's just like, I don't know. Inquisition, I don't know. So finally, my friend is African American, and he hits him with a nuclear bomb. He says, dude, slavery? And this poor guy, his face contorted. I mean, he was like worked up, breathing. It looked like he was trying to pass a kidney stone. He's just like sweating. And my buddy's just like, dude, why are you wincing? It's clear. You know that it's, and finally he's like, all right, I believe it. I believe it's true. Okay. Objective morality. If there is such a thing, what could explain it? Well, atheistic philosophers and thinkers have offered a number of different explanations for this. Walter Sinnott Armstrong, atheistic philosopher, he just says it's a brute fact. There just is an objective moral law. He says there is just plain morality. What's immoral about causing serious harms to other people without justification? But now it seems natural to answer. It simply is, objectively. Don't you agree? Well, of course we agree. That's what we're trying to explain, Walter. That's what we're trying to describe. It's like me coming home from vacation and my grass is cut and the trash is taken out, and I'm like, what could explain this? And someone's like, well, it just simply is cut, objectively. Don't you agree? Yes, it's not a bad explanation. It's not a good explanation. It's no explanation. David Hume and A.J. Ayer, a logical positivist of the 20th century, argued that morality is really just contained to our emotions. So Hume said that vice and virtue are the object of feeling, not of reason. It lies in yourself, not in the object. Well, this would be a good case in point, not for objective morality. Not when we say that torture is wrong. I'm not saying that it just makes my skin crawl. I don't like it. I'm saying there's something wrong about that thing happening out there, the object. And this is just explicitly admitting, well, there is no such thing. It's a matter of your feelings. That's all. Other people argue that evolution can give an account for objective morality. To this, we would just have to simply point out the definition of evolution. Evolution means change over time. So for someone to say that evolution brought about morality, this is not objective morality, because objective morality does not change over time. It deals with the object out there, not with subjective impulses in here. Yes, it's argued that we could have certain impulses because of cooperative behavior and reciprocity and troop behavior, but this would just give us impulses that would change over time, and they could have gone any other different direction. So this is not objective in the least. Evolution is a descriptive process. It does not prescribe anything. What about reason? Some people say, well, we just come up with good reasons for morality. Think about that for a second. Now, you need reason to do moral thinking. Reason is necessary for morality, but it's not sufficient. Like it's necessary to have gas in my car to drive across town, but I need a car. The gas itself isn't sufficient to get me across town. Reason is necessary to do science, but reason is not the same as science, and reason is not the same as morality. Because even though you have reasons to do such and such a thing, that does not mean that you have obligations to do that thing. Somebody might say, well, I'll give you a reason to come over and do this, $200. Yes, that's a good reason, but I'm not morally obligated to do so. Atheistic philosopher Kai Nielsen wrote this. He said, "We have not been able to show that reason requires the moral point of view, or that all really rational persons shouldn't be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I have painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflection on it depresses me. Pure, practical reason, even with a good knowledge of the facts, will not take you to morality. Reason cannot account for it. Other people say culture or law, that perhaps we just have a cultural consensus, and whatever the culture thinks, that cultural consensus becomes what's moral and immoral." Paul Kurtz, who's an atheistic philosopher, says the moral principles that govern our behavior are rooted in, what's their foundation? What's their grounding? What are they rooted in? What explains them? They're rooted in habit and custom, feeling and fashion. So whatever is the cultural zeitgeist, whatever the fashion is at the time, that's being equated with morality here, according to Kurtz. So in other words, morality is just cultural taboo. It's like wearing white socks with a tuxedo. It's like belching loudly at the dinner table. I'd like to show you a picture of a cultural taboo, and it's a little bit disgusting, okay? Maybe even downright horrific. If you have young children in the room, you might want to have them not look, all right? It's a picture of me when I was 13 years old, all right? And this is it. Oh. Did somebody say aw? Is that what you said? Don't encourage him for what he's doing. Look at me, I was 13. I was pale, I was skinny, I had these big bug eyes that stuck out of my head. I was constantly sweating, I was like slimy. I looked like I was on a perpetual mission to get the ring back from Frodo. Look at that face. Only a mother could love. Oh. But look at what I'm wearing in this picture. This is in the heat of summer. I got a denim button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up past the elbows to show off my delicate forearms, with a watch on the wrong hand, and my hair delicately gelled and parted in the middle like alfalfa. Look at that again. That's just terrible. It's just awful. That's cultural taboo. Now, you'd say all those things I'm wearing. You're like, people didn't dress like that. I know. I was breaking cultural taboo. I didn't learn how to dress myself until I got married. I mean, it's really bad. If this is the case, that really what we're saying is that morality is equivalent to cultural taboo, breaking taboos, then what we're tacitly admitting is that there is no such thing as moral progress. All you have is moral change. Moral progress, like abolition, women's suffrage, child labor laws. To say that these were moral progresses is to say that there is a standard outside of culture toward which we're moving. But if you don't have a standard, you don't have moral progress, you just have moral change. Under this view, it would follow that there are no such thing as moral reformers. Tonight, we were about to have Dr. John Perkins up on this stage. He is a genuine moral reformer. I saw him speak back in 2006 in Indianapolis, and it changed my life. Under this view, a moral reformer like Dr. Perkins wouldn't be a reformer appealing to a transcendent law outside of culture. He would be considered a moral deviant within the culture. Because if morality comes from culture and someone opposes that morality, then by definition, they themselves are immoral. This would mean that there are no such thing as immoral laws, because by definition, culture produces morality. But can you ever think of something that is immoral and yet is legal? Can you ever think about something in the history of the human race that was legal but immoral? Finally, what happens when cultures disagree? Did you know that at the Nuremberg trials, when the Nazis were being tried by the world government at the time, the world nations at the time, the Nazis appealed to this cultural relativism. They said that we are just conforming to our culture, and morality is really just conforming to the culture in which we find ourselves. Who are you to judge us from a different culture? And the justices there said, no, there is a law which is above the law. There is a transcendent moral law that goes over individual cultures. Other people say utilitarianism. This is the idea that whatever is good for the maximum amount of people is the good. Jeremy Bentham, who is the high priest of utilitarianism, philosopher, he says, natural rights is simple nonsense. Natural and imprescriptible rights, rhetorical nonsense. Nonsense upon stilts. Could you be any more clear, Jeremy? Under his view, what's good is what's good for the society. But to say that an individual has natural, inalienable human rights is simple nonsense, rhetorical nonsense, and nonsense upon stilts. In fact, this is the view of every totalitarian regime. It's the view of the worst dictator of our age. I'm speaking, of course, of Thanos from the Avengers. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and don't get to me about spoilers. It's been out for a year and a half. He throws his daughter over. Why? Because he had a utilitarian ethic. That what's good for the many is actually, and that's a really cool theme in that movie when you see the Avengers say, we don't trade lives for lives. Thanos says that we kill lives to save lives. Utilitarianism. Finally, there's the idea of the ideal social contract. This was developed by John Rawls. It's that we come up with an ideal contract for society, and we put a veil of ignorance over the moral ethicist. And so you don't know if you're going to be rich or poor, what ethnicity, which gender, which part of the sociological strata, and you have to decide what's right in the world based on this veil of ignorance. Does that result in objective morality? My question would be, who stands behind the veil of ignorance? Now, somebody would say, well, it's just a hypothetical question, so we're going to let a hypothetical person determine morality for us. How does that make sense? Well, it's an individual. Well, if it's an individual, then why is what they say binding upon me? A contract implies that both people bilaterally sign the contract. If it's truly objective, then what if I don't sign the contract? No, this would be good in discovering morality, but not as a ground for morality. And so, just to make this really simple, do you believe that morality came from matter and motion and molecules? How is that possible? Or do you believe that morality came from a mind, that God, as the source in his nature of morality, exists?